With 19 main titles plus the highly anticipated Breath of the Wild 2 on the way, unraveling the Legend of Zelda timeline is a puzzle almost as challenging as tracking down the Poe sisters in the Forest Temple. So, to stop you from rage quitting, we're switching on tutorial mode to walk you through the infamously convoluted Legend of Zelda timeline. In the beginning, three goddesses, Din, Furore, and Nehru, create Hyrule and the Triforce. Another goddess, Hylia, protector of the Triforce, reincarnates as the first Zelda. The first Link becomes her chosen hero, and the Master Sword, Sacred Realm, Temple of Time, and all the other stuff we see repeated throughout Zelda history come into existence. A lot of this is explained in Skyward Sword, which, upon its release in 2011, firmly established itself as the canonical Zelda origin story, shattering 25 years worth of fan theories. Before, many speculated that the Minish Cap was the first game in the timeline, and before Skyward Sword's release, it was. So good job, fans! But it and the next game, Four Swords, are basically inconsequential except as an afterthought at the very end of one of the branching timelines, so moving on. At this point, we've had three chosen heroes named Link. Okay, technically you can name the hero whatever you want. And at least three princesses named Zelda, who are all named in honor of the OG Zelda. Noticeably absent so far? Ganondorf, the series' main villain. He finally shows up in the next game in the timeline, Ocarina of Time, as a reincarnation/manifestation of Demon King Demise, the baddie from Skyward Sword. In Ocarina of Time, baby Link and Zelda figure out that Ganondorf equals bad for no reason other than looking at him with their eyeballs. After such a terrifying sight, they decide to take matters into their own hands. The only problem is, at the tender age of 10, Link is not old enough to be a hero, so he gets put down for a magical nap until he reaches maturity, which is apparently 17 according to Hyrule. After awakening the sages and defeating Ganondorf, actual 17-year-old Princess Zelda feels bad that Link never got to live out the rest of his childhood, so she uses the Ocarina of Time to send him back. This is where everything goes all wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, resulting in divergent timelines. The first one we'll cover is the Child timeline, which continues right after the ending of Ocarina of Time, where 10-year-old Link restores the Master Sword and warns everyone that Ganondorf wants to steal the Triforce and do bad guy stuff. He goes off to find his missing fairy pal Navi because he just can't imagine living his life without being commanded to listen every 45 seconds. Then winds up in the parallel world of Termina, where Majora's Mask happens. The young hero of time stops the sky from falling, saves the people of Termina, but doesn't even get to join the dang carnival the whole game was leading up to before wandering off and never being seen alive again. Bummer, dude. Now, in this timeline, Ganondorf is apprehended and imprisoned in regular prison, as opposed to corrupted Sacred Realm prison, and eventually sentenced to death. But he's saved from execution by the Triforce of Power, which he still has, even though I'm pretty sure that, timeline-wise, he didn't actually get it until Link fell into his magical sleep. Also, the Link in Twilight Princess is supposed to have inherited the Triforce of Courage from his ancestor, the Hero of Time, aka Ocarina of Time/Majora's Mask Link. You know what, let's just make like Nintendo and gloss over this. Anyway, since they can't kill Ganondorf, who I guess is immortal now, the sages banish him to the Twilight Realm. Therefore, Twilight Princess Ganondorf is the same Ganondorf as the one in Ocarina of Time because he's either actually immortal or time passes differently there? Whatever, he of course makes his way back to the Light Realm, aka regular ol' Hyrule. He kidnaps Zelda, has a showdown with Link, and this time ends up dead for realsies. Not sealed in a weapon or another realm, but actually stabbed to death with his Master Sword. He does vow with his dying breath that one of his blood will succeed him and makes good on that promise in Four Swords Adventures, but honestly, this is more like a side story with no bearing on anything that happens before or after, and it feels like Nintendo just forgot about it, threw a dart at the timeline, wound up here and said, good enough. Jumping back to the end of Ocarina of Time, the timeline where Link did grow up continues on without him. This is what's known as the adult timeline. Without the hero, everything falls apart. Ganondorf escapes the corrupted Sacred Realm, and the gods flood the world to protect Hyrule, which lies dormant at the bottom of the newly created ocean. Many years later, we end up with the Wind Waker and Phantom Hourglass, both of which star the same Link and Pirate Zelda. And 100 years after that, Spirit Tracks, which features a new Link, a royal engineer, and Ghost Zelda. No, really, Zelda is a ghost for most of this game. Anyway, Ganondorf only shows up in Wind Waker in this timeline because at the end of it, he gets killed for, like, forever. And by the end of Spirit Tracks, everyone is living happily ever after in Hyrule, but with trains now. Wait, what about all other Zelda games, like the original Legend of Zelda from 1986 or the much-beloved A Link to the Past? Those all happen in yet another timeline, not one created by the time paradox of sending, quote, adult, he's not an adult, he's 17, Link back in time, There's a whole other scenario where Link straight up dies in the fight against Demon King Ganon at the end of Ocarina of Time, resulting in the Fallen Hero timeline. This one kicks off with the Super Nintendo classic, A Link to the Past. We have a new Zelda, a descendant of Ocarina of Time Zelda, who apparently lived even though Ganon stole the Triforce of Wisdom from her, and a new Link, the last descendant of the Knights of Hyrule, who all died fighting Ganon's demon army after he escaped the Sacred Realm. Aghanim, definitely not Ganon, definitely is Ganon, and he's the same Ganon as the one in the final battle in Ocarina of Time. At the end of Link to the Past, Link beats Ganon, retrieves the Triforce, wishes Hyrule back to prosperity, and entrusts the magical artifact to the royal family. He then goes off on a journey of self-discovery in Link's Awakening, except no he doesn't, because the whole thing turns out to be the Windfish's dream. So Link was just hanging out on a piece of driftwood in the ocean for a while. This brings us to the Oracle games, Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, which feature the same Link as the previous two games. Ganon's surrogate moms, Twin Rova, who we met in Ocarina of Time, plan to revive him. Link to the Past Zelda is there and kidnapped, and Link beats both Twin Rova and a badly revived mindless demon pig Ganon, then sails off into the sunset. Hundreds of years after that, new Link, new Zelda, new baddie named Yuga, and it's A Link Between Worlds, aka A Link to the Past again, but with paintings and parallel universe goth Zelda. Okay, it's not quite that simple, and even though Ganon isn't in the game per se, he does exist as a concept, and Yuga uses his power for boss fight purposes. Anyway, Yuga/Ganon dies. Link and Zelda get the Triforce out of Hyrule's Sacred Realm, wish Lyrule's Triforce back into existence, and it's peace and prosperity for all. Then, the same Link travels to Hytopia and helps Styla get her groove back. Seriously, the entire plot of Triforce Heroes revolves around saving a princess from bad fashion. Anyway, after Link Between Worlds, Hyrule is thriving. But then there's some business with an unworthy heir, his sister who's also a Zelda, and an evil magician, all of which gets explained in The Adventure of Link, the last game in this branch of the timeline. But before that, we have the original Legend of Zelda. This game Zelda divides up the Triforce of Wisdom to keep it safe from Ganon. Again, the same Ganon from Ocarina of Time, even though he has died twice at this point. Naturally, a new Link shows up and saves the day, reuniting the pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom and claiming the Triforce of Power upon defeating Ganon. So 6 years later, on his 16th birthday, because I guess this far in the future the timeline is tired and decided it's now fine for 10-year-olds to be heroes, a glowing Triforce mark shows up on the back of Link's hand. The current Zelda's nursemaid, Impa, tells him about the other Zelda, the one with the garbage brother, confusingly called Zelda the First, even though she's probably more like Zelda the 27th. But until Hyrule Historia showed up and screwed everything, everyone assumed that she was the first, and the reason all the other princesses were named Zelda, because they straight up say so in the game Adventure of Link. Link goes on his adventure, defeats his shadow self, finds the hidden Triforce of Courage, the curse is broken on sleeping Zelda, and now two Zeldas, Link, and all the people of Hyrule live happily ever after, the end. Oh, but it's not the end. There's still Breath of the Wild. That takes place at the very end of the timeline. Which one, you ask? All of them. Yep, that's right. Nintendo just stopped trying and said this one takes place so far in the future that all of the timelines would be myth. But since we do know that Breath of the Wild 2, which is a direct sequel to the first Breath of the Wild, will see someone who looks an awful lot like Link taking to the skies, much like the original chosen hero, is it possible that maybe, just maybe, he'll travel back to the very beginning and set this whole mess right? Or would that be worse, because then we'd have to make another video unexplaining everything we explained in this one? Hello, TVA, I'd like to report a variant. That's our rundown of the entire Legend of Zelda timeline up to this point. Does it seem like it's unnecessarily convoluted and none of this matters because the games rarely directly reference each other and Nintendo didn't make any attempt to connect them until they'd already been making them for over 2 decades? Yeah, but don't you feel smarter for knowing? Also, yeah. And knowing is half the battle. Learning how to flurry hit Lionels before they yeet you off a mountain is the rest of the battle.